Hi, I'm Alan Ogilvy. I'm lead product manager at Friend MTS, and I want to welcome you to the third in our series on how to trust your player. I'm here with Daniel.
Hi, I'm Daniel Weinberger, Principal Solutions Architect at Bitmovin.
And if you've been following our partner series so far with Bitmovin, Intertrust, and ourselves here at Friend, we've heard about DRM. Now it's on to playback. We're talking about the components that any streaming media solution looking to protect their investment and revenue should have. In the third articles we've just published, Bitmoving discusses in more detail about these best practices. So, Daniel, what can we expect in our chat today, and what are the topics?
So today we'll be talking about the streaming in challenging environments, challenging from a security standpoint, of course. We will also chat about how to bolster streaming defenses by limiting oversharing with concurrency management and also domain locking. And finally, we will discuss the three golden rules to gaining and retaining trustworthy video players at OTT services.
And what is Bitmoving's role in the content protection chain?
As a player solution, by the time content arrives at Bitmoven's player, a majority of the protection measures must be already implemented. Although it's possible to arrive at the player without any of that, so without any concrete DRM, without watermarking or client hardening solutions, this is something that we would typically advise against, as not all consumer players can be trusted or trusted enough to simply view your content without engaging some kind of piracy.
Can you walk us through why the browser is a challenging yet critical environment to safeguard against this piracy?
So different than other platforms like iOS, the browser environment is open by default. So everyone can open their dev tools, for example, tinker with the code or even start or try to debug it. However, web is still a very, very critical platform to reach your audience. So what happens there is that the JavaScript, the website source code, is interpreted in the browser instead of compiled ahead of time. So masking the code for how you interact with security systems, but also, for example, your backend APIs is an important point.
So what techniques are best implemented to secure the playback and deter the pirates then?
So for that, there are certain tools available, specifically obfuscation techniques. Those techniques are used to render the source code unreadable and ununderstandable to prying eyes. But at the same time, they don't alter how the code works. So there are different steps for this. The probably best known, but more lightweight version of that is the so-called uglifying or minifying of the JavaScript code. So that's typically done to reduce the amount of code delivered to the client. But as a side effect, it also does a little bit of this defense mechanism. However, there are more sophisticated solutions available. For example, Chase Scrambler is one of the most famous ones. They provide significant robustness by also generating code with polymorphic obfuscation techniques and have also more advanced features like generating self-defending code. So it prohibits actively anyone from tinkering with the code within the browser. But also this is not completely foolproof. As said, this is still in a very, very open environment. So all of that can be circumvented given enough time and resources and effort. So having multiple layers of obfuscation and security is part of a robust end-to-end defense strategy, but it should not be the only point.
And certainly, as somebody famously pointed out, foolproof. Never underestimate the ingenuity of fools. Okay, so solutions also need to consider how they limit legitimate users as to how much content they can consume. How should they do that?
Content owners require OTT service providers to limit the number of simultaneous video views from a single authenticated user account, for example, to minimize account sharing. There are different options available for this. The simple approach would be to keep track of the different player events, such as play, pause, or stop events for a single user account. And that can be done by using analytic solutions, for example. The problem with this naive approach is that analytics calls are often blocked by users, and this leads to incorrect data. So what's often a better approach is to use heartbeat messaging, which is driven from the player directly and includes playback time data, is of course, again, tied to a specific user session. And it also contains cryptographically signed data.
So pirates sometimes attack reuse of the player in illegitimate locations. Is it possible to restrict that with Bitmovin? Can you elaborate?
Yes, this is possible. So how we've taken on this is that there's an allow list for the player licensing to prevent such misuse. So prior to deploying a player, the domain name for which the player can be used on must be added within the licenses section of the Bitmovin dashboard by adding that specific domain. It's also possible to add, for example, IP addresses, which is often pretty handy for testing and development.
Okay. So in closing this, what are some of the key takeaways you'd like to share in regards to playback environment and protecting content?
So once you've secured your distribution chain from the source up until to the playback environment and have followed the best practices to secure the playback experience, as we discussed today, it's strongly recommended that you follow these golden rules. Rule number one is to make your content available where your users want to watch it. So Bitmovin does this with the multiplayer SDKs, meaning you have to reach your users on whichever device they own and where they want to consume videos on. Rule number two is feature parity with piracy. You have to create an impactful, feature-rich player and user experience that improves your viewers' quality of experience. You should never punish your legit users by restricting how they can view or consume your content. So you should always try to offer them the best quality of the content and reduce the time to release the content. So pirated content is often available very early after or even before the official releases in high quality content. And you have to get to as close to that as possible. And rule number three is to provide your content at a reasonable price point. As mentioned in the first golden rule, Bitmovin's Player SDK enables you to spend less time developing workflows for each potential player implementation, made possible by reducing your own workflow cost with easy-to-use configurations. And the combination of these three golden rules create a more favorable user experience than that of pirated content providers. So make it harder to pirate content, but easier to pay for content.
Yeah, that's true. Thanks, Daniel, for that. So check out the third article of How to Trust Your Player, which we posted last week. It covers the details of what we discussed today. Look out for the fourth article coming soon, and we'll have another of those fireside chats as well. We'll be covering the considerations for use of tools such as fingerprinting, watermarking, and anti-piracy monitoring, as well as some insights into piracy and how to really trust your player. Also, don't forget that we will wrap up the series with a webinar. And as always, we're also keen to hear your views on the topic, so do please get in touch. Thank you.